Okay, today we're gonna start. Please welcome Malena. Malena's Annable.
I'm so happy to be here, you guys.
Here in person, she's come through the magic of the screen to our world.
I'm happy to see everyone.
But if I write it this week...
Were you always in Oregon?
No, I grew up in Minnesota. And I grew up in a super fine arts family where my dad worked for a theater and my mom worked for a chamber orchestra. And so I grew up in darkened rehearsal spaces. But they would have really amazing parties where New Year's Eve was crazy at our house, where you've got all these actors and all of these musicians coming together. And I mean, the parties were amazing. You know, it's like as the kid, you know, I'm sitting on the stairwell just peering through the railings this is awesome. Yeah, crazy games of charades and things. My mother went into labor with my sister because she was trying to act out some dictionary title, 9th edition, and she's laughing so hard she went into labor. Yeah, it was a great way to grow up, but it was nothing tangible. I don't know how I can be surrounded by this all the time. What career path, you know, where some people are pre-med, or some people know that they want to do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really play a lot of video games, but my cousins had games, you know, I remember playing Atari with them, and there was a family reunion that we would go to, and we'd always go to the arcade, and pole position was my absolute favorite. I just loved climbing into that thing and just feeling I'm in charge and I'm driving. So I didn't really play a lot of video games growing up. I mostly we used to run around the neighborhood pretending that we were in making commercials and things, or that we were do you remember those old Kool-Aid commercials where it's the giant Kool-Aid guy would come busting out? We would run around the neighborhood pretending we were the Kool-Aid guy. Yeah, so I didn't play a ton of games growing up. But I always knew that I liked being surrounded by artistic and creative things. So that's mostly what guided me through the early part of my life. And when I was a freshman in high school, I had open heart surgery, which was a total game changer for me. And it made me look at things differently and feel I didn't want to waste anything. It made me less hesitant to do things, but in some ways more hesitant to really commit to things too, because I didn't want to end up hating to do what I loved. And eventually, you know, after a couple of years of college, I actually dropped out because I did not know what I wanted to do. Took some time off, and you know, went back to school, and I had a job working at a video post-production place, and I was just their afternoon receptionist. And before I graduated, I went out to lunch with the owner of the company, and he said, well, we want to hire you on full time. You know, we'll need a producer. We're expanding the company. We'd love to have you do that. I was like, wow, who in college has that experience where a job is just totally waiting for them when they graduate? It just seems really rare. I ended up getting a job at Lucasarts, and I mean, I guess that's where I started to feel like maybe life has a path. But you know, that was a crazy interview experience where it's everybody in the department was just firing off questions at me and almost trying to see if I would trip up. But I just liked them all so much that I just, you know, I don't know, I got the job. You know, I was coming in, Grimm had just shipped, and I feel like the company was still trying to figure out what to do next and where to go. At that time, there were a lot of artists that didn't have a lot of 3D experience. And, you know, the company as a whole had to shift from this mentality of 2D to 3D, and, you know, all of our technology was changing, and it felt exciting, you know, especially for somebody who was new to the company. It felt like there were a lot of possibilities. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. So I got hired into this sound department as their coordinator, and so worked with, you know, at that time, Mike, Pete, and Clint were still there as the heads of the department, and everybody who worked there was awesome. But the sound department, too, was also this, fortified, special place within the company. And they would send me out to, production meetings, and, you know, I was sort of the emissary for the sound department. And I loved it. I had a great experience, but I mostly dealt with, production people or marketing people. I didn't have any interaction with the people on the team. And I was just amazed at the kind of stuff that they did, but I didn't know any of them. So eventually, I left the sound department and I went into the production department. And that was not an awesome experience. Well, so I was just an assistant producer, so it was like, people were shitty to you all the time. There was more like an adversarial relationship between production and everybody, artists and programmers, like nobody, it just didn't really seem like people wanted to work together. It was sort of like, well, we'll do this, but we don't want to help those people out. And I didn't understand that. When I finally just had it and said, I'm out of here. And I didn't have anything lined up. I just said, I have to quit. And the very next day, I got an email from Double Fine saying, we hear you're quitting. Would you like to come talk to us? And I was like, yes, I would. And when I started, I just felt like I have the autonomy to be awesome. Like, everybody's really supportive of one another. There's people actively try to help you out. Like, you don't go to a programmer and they go, or an artist says, I can't do that. Like, everyone just really is super supportive. And it was a great place to throw myself into. And Psychonauts at this point was a little bit more than a year out from ship. And it was just every single day was this great adventure and a great opportunity to really be a part of something special and amazing and feel like I could make a difference. So I immediately started in with sound and voice, because nobody had really been tracking any of that stuff. File naming conventions were inconsistent. There was a mix of scratch VO and professional VO. For 3 years, voice had been put into the game, or text had been put into the game, without any thought that it might need to be localized at some point. We needed to get the rest of the game written and recorded so that the animators could finish animating their cutscenes. So it was sort of like an easy thing. I'd had familiarity with it, so it's like carve that out and just make that happen. Double Fine is known for witty dialogue and being able to be a part of that part of it, which I think is so much of the heart of Double Fine. And it was fun. It was awesome, and it was great to get dialogue, from Tim. He would write something, and you're just giggling as you read through it, and then we'd go into the studio, and then the files would come back, and I'd be giggling again because it far exceeded anything that I could have ever hoped for. I remember listening to the G-Men files at 3 o'clock in the morning, just giggling to myself because they were so perfect and so awesome. This is where I wanted to be. I could be with a bunch of people who were doing super creative things and things that, things I couldn't do myself, but I felt like I was helpful. I felt like I was a part of it. I was given the freedom to do shit I had never been given at any other job. Once I had the data set fixed up, all new stuff had to go through me. I knew that wasn't sustainable. So we wanted to build a tool that more than one person would be using. And so the next revision of the database that we used for Brutal Legend took that into account. It was like, what's the kind of stuff that animators want to see? What are the things that GPs want to see? And what information do they need to get out of it? And also, just the ability for someone to press a button and say, I exported all of the text changes, and they're now going to be in the game. Because before, that was a super convoluted process. So it was about making sure that a broader section of the team could use this tool, and that it would actually be a tool and useful, as opposed to some unwieldy thing. It's become such a part of the fabric of Double Fine. It's like I looked in the database, and there's other tools that have been hooked up into it, and I'm glad that something that I said, hey, we need this, has become something that's been proven to be so useful for the company. I'm glad that we've come up with this system that allows us to react to changes so that we can ship the best possible thing. Like, I would hate it for Tim to say, oh, I came up with a really funny joke. I'm like, oh, we can't do that, Tim. I want him to be able to, type it all in, and we have the funny joke. That was a long time ago. And man, we did it.
How did you make your way up to Portland?
So I was working on Psychonauts, and after it shipped, I got married. And then my husband, 3 weeks after we got married, just thought he was going out for coffee with a friend and got offered a job at Leica. And I came home and I said, how was coffee? He's like, yeah, we're moving to Oregon. I was like, okay, all right. I mean, we had talked about like maybe going there someday, but there was no plan. And then I quit for the first time. And that lasted a Saturday and a Sunday. And then Caroline was like, oh dear God, you gotta help me. And by the end of that next week, I had my computer shipped up to me and I worked. And then I came down, and that's sort of when it started, of just coming down like either, at first it was once a month, and then as we got into like a rhythm of sprints and whatnot for Brutal Legend, I was down here every other week. And TSA people knew me by name. I knew the flight crews. I knew the gate agents. And it was fun, you know, it was good times. And then Brutal Legend finished, and you know, that was hard. I know that people say that Psychonauts was crazy, and it was, but there was something that was like new and exciting about it. Brutal Legend was really hard. I think I was really stressed out. I wasn't sleeping. I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and just work on getting more voice files into the game, or you know, ready for people. And it was just the sheer volume of dialogue that it just felt. I mean, at one point, you know, Nathan said, "But we're good, right? Like this is, you know, what we have now. That's our memory footprint for audio." I was like, "No, it's gonna double," and he said, "No," and I said, "Yes." And then when we got our, you know, scratch or our skirmish dialogue in, and it checked it in, and Nathan's, "Are you serious?" I was like, "I told you." So there were, I don't know, 35,000 lines of dialogue. I don't know what the word count is, but it was crazy. You know, I needed a break.
I would like to say happily, we have shipped Brutal Legend.
I had moved to Portland, but never spent very much time there, so I felt like I had a foot in each city. It was after I stopped traveling that it became a little bit harder. You know, I worked with Oliver on Once Upon a Monster. I'd never met him. And then when I came on site, he's like, "Oh, it's so great to meet you." And he gave me a big hug. And it was like, yes, you know, it was nice to know that I could still like make those connections and have those relationships with people in the company, even though I had never met them face to face.
So Broken Age was like the first big Tim game since Brutal Legend. Lots of dialogue.
Super excited. Yeah, I mean, again, like I love his writing. I was looking for a repeat of, you know, giggling at 3 a.m. listening to files. Maybe not at 3 a.m., but was looking forward to that experience of like just seeing what comes out of his mind and be able to have my part in making it happen.
Was the experience with this one strange, considering the nature of the project and the openness, how public it was? And I mean, were you insulated because you weren't always here?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, if anything, the stuff that you guys did was awesome because it gave me a window into the people that I wasn't actually seeing, but I got to see them with every episode that was released. And even though I knew a lot of the conversations that had happened, or I knew about the sort of general state of development, it was still fun to see everybody. So they couldn't necessarily see me, but like from my perspective, like because you guys filmed everything, it made me feel like I was a part of it again. And I hoped that if I was feeling that, and I am a part of it, that it meant that all of the backers who were watching it also felt that way too. You know, that they were really a part of this crazy experience. Even though I know my job really well, every game has new challenges, and it's fun to face those head on. I just hope that I can always be a part of what happens here at the studio. It's a super exciting place to be. And I feel like I go back to thinking about what I wanted when I was younger. Like, this is it. This is the creative atmosphere that allows me to like tangibly feel like I'm a part of something. But yeah, it's like I'm not the one that's programming. I'm not the one that's creating art. I'm sometimes doing things with the code, with voice files. Like, that's great. But, yeah, it's like, again, I have that autonomy to be awesome here, and that people just trust me to do my job and to get it done, and everybody else is in the same boat, and that's a really cool place to be.